Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today we're joined by physiotherapist Andy Renshaw. So Andy, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. So kicking off, whereabouts are you from originally?
I'm from Droylsden. How well do you know Manchester?
I know Droylsden. I've got a very good friend in Droylsden.
Have you? I grew up there. Grew up in Droylsden and then sort of moved to the border of Droylsden, Ordenshaw, but over that way, went to Ordenshaw High School, college over that way as well. And then flew the nest a few years after that.
And so at what point then, so growing up in Manchester, at what point do you think, right, I want to go into doing physio? Is that something that you decide when you were at GCSE level, A level, or?
So I can't remember what actually put it in my head, but I remember being at a careers evening at high school and meeting this physio, and I remember that being something that I really wanted to do, and I wanted to sort of learn more about it. I always wanted to be sort of sport related. I was always heavily sporty when I was at high school, played sort of rugby, football, athletics, whatever. But wanted to be, I loved that side of it. Met this person anyway at a careers evening at high school. I remember it so clearly, and she basically told me that if I wanted to be a physio, I had to get straight A's in my GCSEs, and I was only estimated at A's and B's. And she said, unless you're going to be a straight A student, there's no point you going because you're not going to be able to make it. And I thought, oh my God, that was a proper sucker punch at like 14, 15. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to do that. And I always just presumed I just wasn't going to be good enough or intelligent enough to do it. And I don't know why, it just proper hit me that. So I sort of went away from it a little bit and ended up going down the sports science route of it. And then I went to university, cut a long story short, a couple of years there. Went to university on a sports science degree. And the moment I got out there, although I loved what I was doing, I met some of the people off the physio course, and they were, they'd got worse GCSEs and A levels than I'd got. And I thought, what have I done here? Why have I been affected by that one person's advice? I guess if I'd have wanted it more, maybe I would have asked more than one person, but it was just that one individual. I looked up to that one individual and thought, I'm not going to be bright enough. So again, I finished the degree in Sheffield and ended up I went straight for the physio degree at Salford University afterwards. Went on that and didn't look back. But so anyone I speak to now who talks to me about it, and any high school student or college student that either messages me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter or contacts me here and wants to talk to me, I try and always make sure I have time for them, because I don't want someone else to be put off it. If they think they're going to love doing it, just go and do it, because whether you think you're intelligent enough or not, if you want it, you're going to go and do it anyway. So ignore all that nonsense advice. Don't be put off by it, because I was. And although I had a brilliant 3 years doing a sports science degree, and that did benefit me afterwards, and I met some lifelong friends from it, loved my time there, but I wouldn't have done that extra 3 years at a fair bit of cost to my parents as well at the time, by the way, as well, because I remember telling my dad I wanted to go back to university at the end of that, and that didn't go down too well, to be honest, Andy.
No, I can imagine. So how do you think that the sports science has helped you then?
So I spent throughout my entire time at university, so the 3 years at Sheffield was full-time. 4 years afterwards at Salford was the part-time, and I couldn't afford to do the 3-year degree, and my parents didn't have the money to fund another 3 years at university for me, and I didn't want to use them to do that either. I ended up working in a gym. I'd always done plenty of rugby and football and stuff, and I started doing a lot of gym work when I was at school, because playing rugby, everyone else was, all the big lads were massive, and I wasn't, so I needed to get a bit stronger and stay with them. So I had a bit of an interest in the gym anyway, and thought it'd be a cool little job to do while I was at college, and did exactly that. I was doing a bit of PT work at the Midland Hotel gym in Manchester, doing some work there. I'd worked there at a weekend and was in Sheffield during the week, and through that met up with a few athletes here and there at university in Sheffield. Through the sports science degree, ended up doing a bit of S&C work with some athletes and part-time voluntary work at a football club over there at Sheffield United. And as I was working as a physio, studying as a physio afterwards for those 4 years, although sport is such a small element of a physiotherapy degree, the bit I wanted to go into, I think it made me more sellable. And the case in point, the proof for me was at the end of my first year, I was really pestering football clubs, motor racing teams, anyone I thought could actually potentially employ a full-time member of staff, saying, this is what I've done. I've tried to work all the time, right through college, right through university. I've worked part-time to get experience. I worked free for a year at Manchester Rugby Club in Cheadle-Hulme, around the corner from here, doing 2 nights a week, working full-time, shift job in Manchester City Centre at the gym, 2 afternoons and evenings at university. I would work 2 evenings at the rugby club, and then I'd do work a match day on a Saturday. And my work there was the physio I knew at the time. I just said, give me some experience working as a physio, and I'll train the lads for free. I'll do the pre-op programs. I'll do the strength and conditioning stuff. And at the end of that first year of university, after sending out CVs and everything, I got tons of thanks, but no thanks. And then Bolton Wanderers rang me out of the blue and just said, our academy fitness coach and our academy physiotherapist, one of them, because they had 2, the number 2, so there was a head guy already in place. The number 2 and the fitness coach had gone with the first team, and they were after someone dual qualified. So they wanted someone with a bit of S&C experience, but also with some expertise in terms of physio. And because I was working under the supervision of a physiotherapist and a top one at the time there at the football club, he was class, Steve Foster. So he'll probably be watching this, or you'll have seen him with alongside Mark Leather now at university. Just a brilliant bloke to work with and learn from. And he obviously had the patience and allowed me, they offered me the job. But whilst I was there, I was afternoons and evenings twice a week at Salford University, and they allowed me the flexibility to go and do that. So having the dual, the nearly dual qualification, because I wasn't quite chartered as a physio at the time, they gave me that opportunity. And that work, I'd like to believe, hopefully, it certainly benefited me afterwards. But what I also didn't want to be a newly qualified physio and go, oh, right, they're a newly qualified physio, so he isn't that good or he isn't that experienced. I worked for 8, 9 years, qualified. I worked for 8 or 9 years in gyms, doing voluntary work everywhere, paid work at times as well, because I had to, but loads of voluntary work to get experience so that when I was a newly qualified physio, I wouldn't be viewed as just a newly qualified physio. So I think it helped me massively, and it still does now. S&C wise, the physio side of it, physio degrees don't, in my experience of my degree, there was barely any educational, component of that from an S&C perspective. It tends to be more post-grad.
So how do you think that's developed now then? Because I think S&C is such a massive component, but back then, was that something quite revolutionary that was being introduced?
I think, you speak at Bolton Wanderers at the time, I think people viewed it as quite revolutionary. For us, the staff that were in there, I think we weren't viewing ourselves or that department or what we were doing necessarily as revolution. It was just an opportunity for us to have a manager and an academy manager who were allowing us to make changes to things across the board and put things in. And we had the support of the management and the senior staff there to not do anything, but at least have an opinion and be able to affect something. And that even still now, there's so many football clubs and sports clubs out there, professional ones at a massive level, where they still don't utilise that expertise to the extent that they can. And at the time, we were Bolton Wanderers in the Premier League. We were a much smaller club than so many of the other clubs. We didn't have the money to go out and spend 30, 40 million quid on a player. We had to get the best out of the players that we could sign. And the manager at the time was unbelievable in that support. And it was a brilliant experience. And I just loved my time there. I loved my time at that football club. 7 years, and it was just, never worked a day in my life. Amazing. Honestly, loved it.
So how did you find it then? So you'd gone from doing these voluntary roles and all of a sudden you're going into this really exciting environment. How euphoric were you at that point? Did you literally love it from day one?
Yeah, virtually day one. So I went in as the academy fitness coach and working underneath the guidance of Steve Foster with the academy as the academy physio, just getting some experience with him. And literally that pre-season, we'd signed, remember how many players we had at the time? Youri Djorkaeff, JJ Okocha and Ivan Campo. And Mark Taylor, the head physio at the time, the head of sports medicine, I remember him sort of giving me players like that to do sessions with from day one. And you think, hang on a minute, I'm just some scruffy kid from Droylsden, straight out of university. But the trust they had in us, it was just, you know what you're doing, just back yourself, go and do it. You've got the education, that you have to learn on your feet, obviously, very, very quickly in a professional environment with experienced professionals. But it was from the start. I wouldn't say I was starstruck. I think it's probably the wrong term, but massively flattered that someone actually wanted to give me that opportunity at such a young age. And it was fantastic to have that trust. And it was a big learning curve. I think as a line manager, as you go on, a few years later, I become a department head, and you want to do the same for your staff. If you bring them in, for the staff that are under your care, that you feel like you're responsible for, you want to give them that trust. You want to back them and say, well, listen, don't care about who he is or who she is. You're qualified. You're the specialist in this area. You go and deliver what you feel like you need to deliver. Go. Yeah, it was euphoric. Yeah, but it was like that every day. I used to love it. Every single day, we just loved going into work. We worked. The staff that were there. You look at the staff that have come through that department and where they've gone afterwards. They've all done phenomenally well, and I don't think it's just because they're good clinicians. They're good people. They're good people, and those people will always succeed because people always want good people around them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just going back to those three players that you mentioned then. So what did you see anything different from them physically? Obviously, technically, they're absolutely incredible players, but in terms of mindset and the physical attributes, could you see that they were different and that's why they got to the level that they played at?
God, when you talk about technical issues, things like that, I'm clueless when it comes to football. That's not my specialty. I know very clearly where my boundaries are drawn, to be honest, Andy. So from a football perspective, wouldn't have a clue. In terms of their mentality and their professionalism, we signed, in my opinion, the lads that we had were extremely well driven. Of course, like you get that now in any professional player, but but they were extremely well focused. The sacrifice that they give is phenomenal. Of course, there's the financial rewards, and people say, "Oh, well, they get a lot of money." Because I'd moved from Madrid to Bolton if I was offered that kind of money. We knew at the time we were bringing players in invariably that were never the finished product, but they were all players that were mad keen to take that opportunity and soak up information and use the expertise that hopefully they had around them in support staff, from a sports science perspective and from a medical perspective. And pretty much invariably, there's always one or two, but I wouldn't say any of the big players we had there at that time were resistant to really anything. They were open to anything. I think they all knew, they were at Bolton because Man United weren't going to sign them, or Liverpool weren't going to sign them. Or we had one or two former Liverpool players that were in there that, that maybe carried other kind of issues. You have to accept that it can be a little bit challenging at times, but I loved them. They were all, all those lads were all so respectful of the staff. They were class. Good people as well as good professionals.
Yeah, no, I certainly remember that time. Hierro, Jardel, all those guys coming.
Oh, I could, well, yeah, if you remember Mario, when he signed, there was an awful lot of work went into him by a couple of the staff. And I still remember now Mike Ford. I was on a bike in the gym at the training ground with a player. And I remember Mike Ford, our sort of head of performance at the time. I remember seeing him walking across the pitch with this guy. And I was like, that's Fernando Hierro. That's actually Fernando Hierro. He's in Chorley at the training ground. It was phenomenal. But again, what a bloke. What a bloke. Absolute legend of the game. And he was like, him and Zidane are my two absolute legends, all-time legends. I could not believe it. Like with him, I was starstruck. Couldn't believe it. But very, within seconds of meeting him, just a very calm, nice fella. Yeah, it was an amazing time.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So Bolton then. So after Bolton, what happened next?
So I was at Bolton in the summer of 2009. There were quite a few players leaving. There were staff changes over the course of that sort of 12, 18 months leading up to the summer of 2009. And I ended up getting a call from someone at Liverpool Football Club just saying we are going to change a few things here. This was towards the end of that season. There's an opportunity now come available. Would you be interested in coming to us? We'll give you literally blank sheet of paper. We want you and this person to come in and reshape the Academy Medical and Sports Science Department for us. I went to Melwood, met with them, discussed what was going to happen, and there was no way. I knew the people I was going to go and work with. There was no way I was saying no. Just no way I was saying no. It was all about, and there was never a conversation even about money. It wasn't about the financial side of it. At Bolton, it was exactly the same. You know, I earned an awful lot less than I've ever done at Bolton Wanderers, and it was the happiest time I've ever had in football. I would say I absolutely loved it. But it was never about that. It was just, the football club were enormous. It was an opportunity to build and develop something and be part of an enormous football club with really good people. And the people in any business, doesn't matter whether you're in football, medical, sports science, or you're in a shop floor somewhere, if you work with good people, you're going to enjoy the environment you work with. And it's about trying to make that environment challenging, but also fun. It's got to be fun. We work 7 days a week in football. If we get a chance to finish at 2:00, if I get a chance to send someone home at 2:00, go home. You don't need to be here. You don't need to feel like you've got to be here. You need to be able to enjoy yourself. You need to have that freedom to say, actually, go and pick your kids up today from school, be around them. It was too good an opportunity to turn down. And then after that, I was fortunate to be given more and more responsibility and take on sort of more challenging roles at higher levels. And loved it, yeah, absolutely loved it.
So when you get approached for that, then who is that call normally from? Not asking for names, but like, what is it from? Someone from the medical side? Is it more from the club themselves?
No, it was football. So there were changes at the academy, which unfortunately led to loads of staff losing their job, and that had already happened. And I got a call from the football side of things saying, "We'd like you to come here." I think it was at the time Rafford there'd been some issues between the academy and the first team, I think, and Rafford had signed a new contract in the summer of 2009, maybe 2000 or somewhere early 2009. And he wanted to change a couple of things. And one of those was the academy. So the person sort of overrunning the academy rang me and asked me to go there and help sort of set up a different department. So it's never the best way of, but that's how it works. It's never the best way of taking a job or be given an opportunity. But if I don't take that opportunity, someone else is going to. And I can't, I don't, whether I agree with it or not, if I'm getting offered that opportunity, how can I not take it to work for that football club?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then what are your thoughts as well in terms of, I know historically, and I'm not sure exactly how it works now, but when a manager would come in, they'd have their own team, and that would be the way it was. Do you think that's a better way of doing it, or do you think it should be a siloed thing, the medical departments?
Yeah, listen, in an ideal world, your head of the medical department or the head of performance or whoever it is, that overarching figure, you want them to be able to have total control, but that person has got to know what each of those departments does. In an ideal world, that's exactly what happens. You get someone there who knows what each department should be doing and knows whether they're doing a good job or not. In an ideal world, yeah, of course, loads of football clubs have done that. Saying, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put this structure in place. And then 6 months later, the manager gets sacked. A new manager comes in and goes, I don't want you in, I want someone else, or I want someone else to work with you. And it goes, and that process changes. In an ideal world, yeah, of course, we want that strength. But that strength has got to come from the very top of the hierarchy of a football club, above the manager, to say, when we bring in a manager, they can't touch this, they can't touch this, they can't touch this. But if that manager becomes successful or just comes in and they're already a big name, they're going to control what they want to anyway. So, that's happened across the land in loads of football clubs, rightly or wrongly. And when that occurs, it's always going to cause problems because you're going to have differences of opinion. And you've got someone then who's extremely close to the manager and has got the manager's ear, and they might want things done a certain way, and that might not be the way that we're used to doing things. Or when I say we, anybody in that department might be doing something a certain way. They bring someone else in, and whether he's Italian, he's French, he's Spanish, whoever, American, whatever they may be, they're going to have their own way. And if they've got the manager's ear, they'll get their own way, rightly or wrongly. That's just professional sport, and it's not unique to football. It happens in cycling, it'll happen in any sport. In rugby, it's exactly the same. That's just part and parcel of working in professional sport. Unfortunately, it's not ideal. It does cause problems, but you've just got to find your way to be malleable around that and work with it. You either go with that, or you decide it isn't for you, and you stamp your feet, and it won't end well if that happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then how did it go at Liverpool then in terms of that the academy setup? How did you enjoy that process of going in?
What, to set it all up? To
Yeah.
help set it up. So I went in with Dave Galley to go and do it. And, it always presents its challenges because you think, oh, hang on a minute, you don't want to overstaff things as well. You don't want to go too comprehensive, but at the same time, if you've got the opportunity at that time to staff it the way you believe it to be staffed, you've got to sort of, it was nervy. I didn't want to overstaff it. We were very conscious not to put too many people in, but we wanted to still provide a comprehensive service. We wanted to look after those players as best we possibly could do and give, a level of care that was unparalleled. And we had the backing to do that. So, yeah, it's great. When do you ever get that opportunity? When do you get ever that opportunity to just be given carte blanche, do what you want, and I'll back you?
Mm.
In our line of work, that just doesn't happen very, very often. So how do we go about it? We knew people anyway that we knew were good people, were experienced, and we wanted to bring them in and put them around the players. There's always, there were one or two that fell by the wayside relatively early on because for whatever reasons it didn't suit them, or they didn't suit the sort of way of working that was at the time. But it does take 2 or 3 years for that to kind of calm, so you have like a relatively smooth process. So consistency in what we do, or what should I say, sort of longevity. People say, oh, they've been at the football club too long. They've been at the football club too long. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing as long as they challenge themselves and want to do better. If you want to do better, your department and your processes evolve constantly. You shouldn't be static. If they're static and they're not changed anything for years and years and years, then all right, fair enough. You could query whether changes are made. But I'd like to believe, and you'd have to ask the staff that are there now, that what we did at the time was we provided a department that allowed staff to develop however they saw fit, but it had to be in line with the objectives of the football club as well. So, we had to have, your decision making had to be informed. If you want to go and do a course on this, well, why do you want to do a course on that? Is that benefiting your private practice that you're doing of an evening a couple of nights a week? Or is it because, we've had a ton of hamstring injuries or hip and groin injuries? If you want to focus something, get it focused on that actually benefits the football club. So it's informed. And we also, hopefully they'll say this, I wanted to be put in a position, this sounds so corny, but I want them to challenge me. I've got to be confident enough that they can challenge me without me thinking, is he after my job here? Is he going around my back? Is he speaking about someone else? We had a set of staff that just all looked after one another. I might have been running the department, but if I had to manage an under 15 player on a Tuesday night, I wouldn't see it as a request by someone to put me down or put me out of the way. I didn't care. I loved it. I enjoyed doing what I was doing, and I hopefully gave the staff an opportunity to be vocal about what they wanted, what they didn't want, how they thought their role in that area could be made better. And we tried to put processes in place that they recommended. So yeah, I think again you'd have to get one of them on an interview maybe and see whether they agree or not.
Yeah, you can. I won't ask you which one to bring on, so it's impartial. But yeah.
Ask any of them. You feel free. Yeah, feel free.
No, that sounds good. And that when you're moving, again, Bolton, good club, but then you're moving to Liverpool, it's a huge club. Like,
yeah.
How does it feel? Like, do you feel that level of expectation and size?
Yeah. I mean, I moved from the first team at Bolton to the academy at Liverpool, so there wasn't, it's different. The pressures are different. I still, any of us in our line of work, we still feel that pressure. We should feel that pressure to bring players back as quick as we can, but as safely as we can. So we've still got to constantly question ourselves. And I know we're not, people at a first team level who've never experienced full-time academy work maybe don't necessarily understand that. They're just from the academy. It doesn't matter. Well, if you're decent people and decent staff, it doesn't matter what level you're at. You still want to put someone in as fast as you can, because that's the decision that could cost someone a career or not. Because if you lose their time to develop an opportunity and get that opportunity, then you're risking their career by not bringing them back as fast as you can. So in terms of the pressures, they were different. The only difference is at Bolton, you might have had very easy access to one person or this person, or to make a decision, you just got one person. At Liverpool, you had to go through 5 or 6. You had to include 5 or 6 people in those decisions, or they would feel like you've excluded them. And that's not a criticism. It's just the magnitude of the football club meant there were so many other people that you had to involve or update with regards to certain players or positions, or position in terms of where they were at in the rehab or what they were going to do. You had to involve just that many more people. There was just the staffing level just went from being like this to everyone. I've been there 7 years at Bolton, knew everybody, knew who to go to. Bang, you go into Liverpool and you've got 3 or 4 people working in a player care department for starters. There was one person at Bolton for the first team. Now you go into a department where you've got 3 or 4 for the academy. Different coaches, increased number of coaches, increased numbers of medical staff, sports science staff. It's just a bigger operation.
But does that make it more bureaucratic then? Does that take the enjoyment out to some extent?
It can do. Of course it can. But again, it comes down to the people, doesn't it? I think it comes down to the people. I think it takes time for you to bed in. When we first went into Liverpool, we went in with Rodolfo, who's at Man City now, and another chap called Pep Segura, who's at Barcelona. We went in, and I'm sure that they were dubious of us and what we were thinking. I think some people just think physios are there just to cuddle players and keep them off training and protect them. I think once they knew we were there to actually help support them, it takes months, if not a year or two, for those people to actually realise that you're there to help them as well as the players. Once we got that, it made things so much easier. But yeah, there are those bits at the start where, for the first few months and a year or two, where you have those issues. Because when you include more people, and sometimes stronger personalities at bigger football clubs, that can bring problems. But we're there as a support staff. We're not there to lead and demand things of a football department. We're there to complement what they provide. And if they don't want to listen to us, okay, maybe that's, in our eyes, that's not for the benefit of a player. But we're there as support staff. We're there to complement it and to help them.
Yeah. So in terms of your remit, so you're told him to revamp and to rejuvenate the academy. Is that purely about people, or is that looking at the infrastructure? Is it looking at facilities?
Everything. Right down to weekend cover for an under-9s game away at Middlesbrough at home on different facilities. So, we had to coordinate to what's the game structure? How many players do you have? Because some of them will say, well, actually, we've got 2 under-9 squads. And they're going to play, one's going to play away at Middlesbrough at the weekend, and the other one's going to play at home against Tranmere or whoever. So we had to do everything in terms of protocols. Emergency protocols. If an under-9 group or another 13 group go away to Italy at Easter or April, we'd have to send a part-time member of staff. So we need increased staffing levels and flexibility to accommodate for that. But what we'd also need is an emergency protocol to go away with. So they'd have a travel bag with all the emergency gear with a card on it that was laminated, so that if this happened, this is the protocol for it. So we went right the way through. That was from reserve team down.
It's a huge job, isn't it?
It was good though. It's great. Loved it.
Oh, yeah, no, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, it was good. Great opportunity, but again, it's got to evolve because things change, processes change, and staff change when they come in. We changed. The doctor ended up changing a couple of times over the first 2 or 3 years that was in there. We had part-time doctor support, and they come and go based on whatever. And they'll want to change things. So, okay, right, well, you tell us, you guide it, you're in charge of that. What do we need to do now? But it was good. It was good.
Yeah. And then what happened from there?
So that came through carried on with that until 2016. And then the summer 2016, got a phone call from the chief exec to meet him. And I got a phone call off the manager who asked me to go and run the medical department. They'd made a change at first team level. Unfortunately, it was a person that I knew and liked. But again, I can't do anything about that, unfortunately. For whatever reason, they make changes at football clubs. The manager asked me to go in, said he'd spoke to a few people about me and that he wanted me to go in and be the head physio of the first team. Met the chief exec, then had another call with Jurgen after that. And then took that on. And then it's just manic. Going back into first team football is just absolute manic. Great experience. Loved it again. The opportunity to develop and sort of change things a little bit. At first team level, there's always going to be a little bit more resistance to change certain things. But that's normal. That happens. Different personalities, obviously. Bigger egos when the lads earn an awful lot more money. They want certain things a certain way. We want things a certain way. There's always going to be clashes of personalities and stuff, but again, brilliant experience, great set of lads. Really, really, really good time. But I think as I sort of went on at Liverpool, even prior to that point, I had my eldest daughter at the time. So Ava was born in June 2009. Let's say January then. June 2009. I was very conscious that I wasn't at home a lot. Very conscious I wasn't alone at home. I didn't spend a lot of time at home, and I wanted to try and get a little bit more of that. And I started to then think, what's after this now? What's after this? Where do I continue? Do I carry on working full time in football for the rest of my life, following a manic schedule, games, everything else? And I started to not resent it a little bit, but I started to lose my love a little bit for it. And I don't know, I still loved doing what I was doing, but I started to think there's got to be something else. And I had a few little fallings out with one or two players that may have assisted things for me, unfortunately, but I left the club midway through the 2017-18 season. Not under my choice. I maybe disagreed with one or two things that were going on, but the club have got a certain stance and things that they potentially want to do. Players have certainly going to have an opinion on that at times, and I set up a business. I got contacted by a player from the football club who asked me to rehab him. I took him, started using this gym, agreed a deal with the gym here so I could bring him in, and then bumped into Jeff, who owns the clinic here, and said, listen, I've got an idea for a business. This player was constantly pushing me to try and do it and set it up as a full-time business. He'd had a couple of other friends of his who wanted to do the same thing and wanted a physio to work with them, but they were local. And it just grew from there, to be honest. I went to Jeff and bumped into him in the village nearby in Bramall. And he said, yeah, Andy, what happened to you? I saw it on the news a few months ago. What on earth had gone on? Started having a chat about that. I said, listen, I don't want to go back in at the moment. I've got no interest in doing it anymore. I don't want the nonsense politics of being involved in full-time football. Give me a treatment room at your place. I'll work under your banner, because he's got the contract to be the physio provider for this facility, which is enormous, 12,500 members, phenomenal facility. Everything here, massive state-of-the-art gym. God knows how many swimming pools downstairs, hydro suite, flume, plunge pools, everything. Perfect facility for me. And I just set the business up in here, and I take a percentage of the time now with private patients from general public. And then, at the minute, sort of 60-70% of my time is driving athletes, mainly footballers, through here. And I work alongside clubs to rehab them. And I've just spent 8 months doing a bit of consultancy work, like I say, for Newcastle United Football Club, which has been amazing. Going in there, reviewing processes, protocols, working alongside the doc and the physio there and the other medical staff to help treat, rehab players. It's been amazing. That mix between the two has been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it. So I'm meeting with another couple of clubs in the next 2 weeks to discuss something as well for next season. I'm not sure about the Newcastle at the moment. We'll see how the summer goes. But at the minute, I'm back here literally full time. At the minute, it's 6 days a week, but I don't ideally want that if I can help it. But I have to work when I work. And at the minute, I want to try and look after people as well. So it's busy.
No, it sounds good. So basically, working from that facility there with Jeff then, so you will see players from various levels, and do they come in and use the facility, work with you? It's kind of like, is that alongside you, the medical stuff? How does it work with those players?
With the clubs, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are obviously, and it's not ideal. I've been in that position where I've been a head physio at a Premier League football club where players want to go elsewhere, and you think, oh God, you don't know who you're sending them to, you don't know what they're going to do. Quite often, you don't get any communication from those people, and it's probably a very good reason why that's the case. I didn't want to become just one of those people. I wanted to work alongside club staff. I know how difficult it is. I didn't set the business up primarily to work alongside Premier League players. The majority of the Premier League players that come to me for either a second opinion or a bit of treatment or a little bit of a help with regards to rehab, or they might be carrying something they don't want to tell club staff for whatever reason. That's not my ideal way of working. It genuinely isn't. I set my business up because I also got contacted early on by a couple of players who were out of contract at League One, League Two clubs, they might have been 31, 32, and they were carrying injuries that they'd been out 5 or 6 months from that they shouldn't have been. If decisions had been made better for those people early on, they'd have got the last 2 or 3 months of that season, and the contractors ran down, and the club then say, well, we're not giving you a contract. You've not played for us for 6 months. Well, maybe if the club actually support the medical staff at that club, there wouldn't just be one person there who's got to somehow split him or herself between a squad training at one facility and a group of injured players training at another facility. And the injured players are going to come in and say, oh, physio's rubbish, he just stays with the team. Well, what else is he supposed to do? He can't split himself 2 ways or 3 ways. So I set my business up to try and help them, because they can, if they want additional support during a time where they're manic, it doesn't have to be all season. They can send someone to me for a week or for 3 days when they've got 2 or 3 games during that week and they just ran off the feet, or they want to do a course and go and learn something. They send them out to me and use me as an additional member of staff. Now, I don't, obviously, my preference is that any player that comes to me, I say to them, listen, you need to seriously think about whether you need to speak to your football club about this, because the benefit to the player and the football club is that their staff are fully aware of what's going on. Now, again, by doing that, I'm volunteering that information to clubs and potentially doing myself out of business. But from a longevity perspective, I'd like to believe it generates trust.
Yeah.
That I'm not doing it to be devious and just steal players away from clubs. There are plenty of people out there already doing it, and I don't want to be one of those, because I believe it's a short-term thing, and it's just not me. I'm not dishonest. I'm not dishonest, and anyone who worked for me will have told you that, I hope. I'm not dishonest. It's not me. My business is dead the moment I lie to a player. The moment I am devious with a football club, my business is dead. If this is what I want to do from here on in, which it is, I'd love to do a bit of consultancy work with a football club. And listen, I'd never say never. If a full-time role at a football club comes available and they speak to me about it, then I'd have to consider it. But I'm loving doing what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm not looking at changing it. And if I want that to continue, I've got to be the person I hope I've always been with people, where I'll be open and honest. It doesn't always work being open and honest, unfortunately, in professional sport, but I've got to sleep at night as well. And I don't want to work. I'm not going to keep myself at a football club just by staying close to a player. I'm not going to deliberately generate a relationship with a player or with a member of staff to protect myself and do that. I could have done it multiple times before, and I didn't, maybe to my detriment once or twice, but I don't care about that. I'm not in it to work closely with this player or that player. Yeah. I'm in it to try and test myself at that level and be a decent person.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask, really, which kind of links into what you're saying there. So in terms of how you have to differ, I guess it's more to do with the way that you deal with things, from working in a first team, working with huge name players, say at Liverpool, and then at Academy, and then obviously what you're doing now, which is where you're not directly employed by the club. So I guess there's 3 different ways that you've got to manage the players and the business infrastructure.
Yeah, again, I just try and be honest. So whatever the situation is, if a player sends a footballer to me, I have to speak with that club first and say, listen, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to write the entire are you asking me to do it? Or are you saying, no, Andy, there's the plan. I just want you to perform this. Just do that. That's all I want you to do. No problem. I'm there basically as an additional member of staff for that football club as and when they need it. In terms of managing egos, I'm in a position now where people come to me who want to be with me. And, so hopefully they'll kind of appreciate if I say to them, you need to take this, you need to be a little bit more cautious. This is not a wise move for you at the moment, they might want to use me as a second opinion and say, well, listen, can I be available for that game? Because he's saying I can't. You have to manage those expectations at times. And if I'm being asked to do that, I've got to have that conversation with the club member of staff before I have it with the player. I'm not going to go dead set against a club member of staff unless for whatever reason that isn't right for that particular player. I've just got to do what I believe is right for that patient. But politically, if a club are sending me the player, I'm not going to go straight away and say, nah, they're doing it all wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. This is what you need to do. But in terms of behaviour, do you mean in terms of what, like an ego if a player demands a certain thing, or what?
I guess from like the academy perspective, like you don't have to. Well, maybe you do have to manage the athletes there as well. But then, like you were saying before, when you go into the first team, they're very established players. They've got a lot more pull with the management and higher up the chain even. Yeah, you
do have to manage them 100%. Yeah, at the academy at Liverpool, you still had big egos because you've still got, we had some, enormous players for an academy at the time, but some of them were always going to be very, very big first team names, and they've always got egos, and you do have to manage those because the club want to keep them, and whether they're going to sell them on for 50 odd million quid or they're going to keep them and nurture them and put them into the first team, they're an asset that they want. So you do have to manage them a little bit different. Hopefully, if you've got the respect of them from an early age, and for the academy lads that were there, the Raheems and whoever else that came through, they already sort of knew you and respected you. So it's quite easy when you have your opinion. When you go straight into the first team environment, they don't really know you. They're always going to be very dubious and very strong-minded, especially if they've already had people who do things a certain way, and you're all of a sudden you're like not spending 45 minutes treating them, you're spending 20 and then saying, no, go in the gym, or you don't need it. They'll just say, well, no, I do. And you have to go with it sometimes. If that's what a player needs, that's what a player wants. Mentally, that's what they feel gives them benefit. So whether you believe it as a clinician that it's right for them or not, in that player's, that professional's head, that's what they need. You have to go with it and give them it because it gives them a benefit. Whether you believe it does or it doesn't, it does to them. Psychologically, it makes a difference. So yeah, you do have to go with it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And then just on terms of speaking to Dave Galley about working in COVID, and he said what an absolute nightmare it's been for him. How was it for you in Newcastle?
Well, Dave, I know Dave extremely well. So I know, Dave was the COVID man there, wasn't he, at the training ground? So he had much more responsibility than I did. I was only part-time. So, I get tested 2 or 3 times a week. It's never ideal. It's never ideal because, you're sort of limited to treatment times and durations. It is difficult. And certainly, we had a very well-publicised outbreak of it at the training ground. And that makes things enormously difficult for the staff that were in charge of that, the training ground staff and the club doctor, to try and work together to minimise any positive tests that might come about, because the moment they're in the training ground, it's going to spread. We had to shut the training ground down for about 4 or 5 days, which that hindered a couple of players' rehabs. I was due to go in. I was travelling up that Monday morning, I was travelling up to test one player with a view of putting him back into training on the Wednesday. And as it happened, we couldn't actually get him into the training ground till the Monday or the Tuesday afterwards or something. I can't remember the exact turnaround, but it just causes havoc. You can't bring people into the training ground. You've got a limited bubble of people. It does make things extremely difficult. And the other thing is you don't know what players are doing outside of it either. So, they're always going to go off and get their own person to do this or do that. So are they breaking protocols in COVID times? I've no idea, but there's always that concern. It does, because you've also got to try and educate the players as best you can. Some players will be educated and will take that on. Others, they don't tend to take that advice or listen to it or even hear what you say, and they just go and live their own life and do their own thing. And that causes problems as well for you because you're trying to help them, but potentially that costs you points. A couple of players, we lost a few players as a result of it. And like I said to you before, they had longer term issues afterwards. We lost a couple of those players for a couple of months. And, I'm not saying that those players were, it was because of their, mismanagement of their own behaviour or whatever else. For whatever reason, they ended up with issues afterwards that delayed their return to playing. So it's caused havoc. But that's been the same for all sorts of teams. Injury numbers for certain clubs have gone up, others it's gone down. Trying to manage that for all the staff to work together, coaches, sports science, medical, it's been carnage for them.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Hopefully that's coming to an end now. So So final question, what would your advice be for people thinking about getting into physio and then more specifically trying to get into elite sports?
Trying to get into elite sport. My advice, I'd always encourage them. what I would always look for in someone when I was in that full-time role in sport and I was recruiting, I wanted to see someone that had actually worked. I would not be looking at employing someone who'd gone straight to university, got a master's and a PhD, and wants to work straight away in a Premier League football club. I'd want to see that they'd actually gone out and got experience at any level, because my experience of working at first team levels at Bolton and at Liverpool is that you do have people around there that have been spoiled. And when you get off a team bus at 3 o'clock in the morning and you've just landed from Russia and you've got to travel an hour home and be back to the training ground at 10 o'clock in the morning, is that they get off, they jump in the car and they shoot off. They don't remember that there's a pile of kit to get off the bus yet. I want someone who knows that they've worked. They've got to be the kit man sometimes. They've got to help the kit man, because you might only have one kit man with you and he's got 6 skips to get off. Have a bit of respect for the rest of your staff. You've got to have that experience of working at different levels and knowing that these demands occur, because that's part of being a team of people, whether you're the physio, the kit man, the first team coach, whoever it is. What I look for in staff is go and get experience at different levels in different sports. Don't be afraid or think that you're going to get critiqued or viewed down upon against someone who's gone off and got experience at Manchester United if you've only been at Tranmere for a couple of years. Because at Tranmere, you've had less staff around you. You may well have worked an awful lot harder than someone else who's just been gifted an opportunity to work full time and earn really, really good money comparatively to someone else who hasn't. So I would look for people who've got experience. I just want to see on a CV that they've gone out and worked voluntarily. I really do. I want them to show on a CV that they've actually gone out and wanted to do what they do. Because you only, in my opinion, you only deserve that opportunity if you've worked at a lower standard and got that experience. And it's hard. You know, it's still hard. Even if you've done all that and you've got your MSc or your PhD and your PhD, it's still enormously hard to get into. So my advice is you've got to be sure you really want it. Don't go into it for the money. Go into it for the love of what you do, because regardless of the amount of money you earn, it won't make you happy doing what you're doing, despite what people think now looking at this. They might think, oh yeah, that's all well and good, but if you earn money, it's brilliant. You're still spending 7 days a week away from home, working every day, long hours, traveling an awful lot. And even your off season, people think, oh, you got 6-7 weeks off. You don't. You're still getting phone calls while you sat at the side of a pool and you've got your week's holiday or 2 weeks holiday with your wife and kids. You're still on call. It's all consuming. But if that's what you want, don't ever get put off by being told you're not intelligent enough, you're not good enough. If it's something you want, go and chase it and be persistent.
Yeah, no, I think that's
a lot of advice, that, isn't it? Sorry.
No, it's good. I think it's good for any walk of life. I definitely agree with the work experience thing, because just gets you ready, doesn't it, for doing like a real job. So no, I fully endorse that.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right. We almost got all the way through that. No, it's all right. No, it's...
Someone's calling me. Sorry.
No problem. No, I really appreciate your time on this. So thank you for fitting me in between your many patients there. So no, I appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully we can catch up in Bramwell for a drink at some point. So thank you.
Give me a shout. No problem, Andy. I look forward to it. Thanks for asking me to get involved. Cheers, Andy.
Cheers. Thanks.
Take care, mate.